So for my project, I did how to change a power supply out of an HP Slimline. I did this because I needed to put a new power supply into my computer, and also it's just a good thing to learn how to do because it's not as hard as you really think. So where I started is I removed the screw from the top right hand side there. There was 3 screws, but there's 2 missing for some reason. I do not know why. But the top right hand screw, you pull that out, and what that allows you to do is pull that side plate off so you can access all the internals like the motherboard and all of that. Next, I kind of just dust off the internals just to get a majority of the dust off of it, even though I will be getting more into it and dusting it as I go. I like to just dust it off at the beginning just to get the dust off the areas that I can see at the beginning, just to make sure I get as much dust off as possible. Next, I remove the expansion bay. The reason why I remove this is because right next to it is the disk drive and there's a screw there. The screw is only accessible if you remove the expansion bay. So I had to remove that piece out of there to get to it. Then I removed the front plate off the computer, and this basically allows me to access the disk drive. Once I get the screw out and all the other connections off of there, it allows me to push the disk drive out because that's a front disk tray cover that you push that opens the whole thing. So this is where the connections are. I got the power supply and the data cable on the right hand picture. And on the left hand side I got a screw and a tab that you can see a little bit above where the screw's at. Basically you just get all those disconnected and then you can slide it right on out there so you can access things better, like getting the power supply cable out of there. Next, what I did is I removed the fan cable so that I can take out the heatsink so I can access the power cable to the motherboard a little bit easier. So it also just makes taking the power supply out easier too. So then what I did is I removed the screws to the power supply on the back plate. It's just those 3 screws, and once those 3 screws are out of there, it will slide on out, or in this case, with how small this computer is, it will wiggle on out. And the reason why I say wiggle on out is because as you can see, it's pretty tight fitting in there. So it kind of clips on the top there, so you got to kind of wiggle it around, and with all the cables running through on the right hand side, you can see there you got to kind of wiggle it out, and once you get it wiggled at a certain point, it'll come right on out of there. Next, once I get all of that out of there, I like to do another cleaning of the internals just to get all of the dust that I was able to get with everything in there. So basically just cleaned everything up in there. Like as you can see where the power supply was sitting, there's a lot of dust up there. So I used Dust Off Destroyer, which basically is just a cleaning supply, compressed air. So next I just reinstalled the new power supply in there. Like I said, it's real tight squeeze, but you just got to get the wires down right above where the disk drive goes. Once you get that in there, it'll slide right in, and then you'll be able to start bolting it back in. And as you can see, it doesn't line up very perfectly. It is an aftermarket one. It was the same one as the other one. It was just a little bit bigger, so it didn't really match up perfectly, but it does match up. You just got to kind of wiggle around to get the screws to go in there. But once it's in there, you are good to go. Next, I installed the power cable to the motherboard, and also just made sure that I had all the wires routed correctly so that when I put everything back in, everything goes together real nice and smoothly. Next, I installed the power to the hard drive and disk tray. I showed you this because I didn't have a picture of it earlier. But as you can see, there's the 2 connections there. There's a power supply and the data cable. It's the same as the disk tray. So you want to get those connected because once you get the expansion bay in there, you won't be able to access it. So I reinstalled the disk tray into the desktop. I then connected all the connections I was just talking about, screwed in the screw, got it in there, and then flipped it down so I can get the expansion bay in there. It's really really tricky to get that in there. Next, I installed the expansion bay back in there, clipped it right in, so then I can start putting everything back together. This expansion bay I've never really used, but I'll just put it back in there just in case if in the future I do need to use it. Next, I clip on the faceplate there, and none of the pictures I don't have the faceplate on there, but it's a black faceplate that goes over the whole front of that and makes it just a little bit nicer because that doesn't look very nice on itself right there. And then I just give it another dust off just in case a little bit of dust kicked in there while I was putting everything back in there. So just to make sure there's no dust so everything runs nice and smoothly and that heat sink's not getting any dust in there, and just making sure that the dust level is kept to a minimum. And then I reinstalled the side plate and plug it in, and it was good to go. It's a little bit louder than the old one, but it's a nice little project to do, so it saves you a little bit of money. I got priced out, it's like $60 to get it replaced, so I'd rather do it myself because it was $30 for that aftermarket power supply. These are the tools I used. I just used a standard screwdriver and the smaller ones just to access the flathead to get into parts where like the faceplate clips were, and the dust destroyer as you saw me holding in the pictures for the presentation. So those are all of that I used in the project, and that's it. I hope you guys have a great evening.